Getting in breaking inputs, these are inputs shared by Security Affairs Editor Mr. Manoj Gupta as we are learning that secret negotiations are on between the United States, Israel and Iran, which might not last long. Sources from European Union are saying that Iranian institutions are split between diplomacy and confrontation. Why are they saying so? We are also learning that the EU diplomatic cables from Washington have confirmed a quiet but structured diplomatic activity as far as Israel, the United States and Iran are concerned. How much of an influence can they wield over Iran at the moment? That's a big question that we are going to be decoding with our guest right now. I'm joined in by Mr. Dan Dicker, who is the president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Many thanks to you, Dan, for joining in on CNN News 18. So the moot question right now is how much scope does Iran have for diplomacy, given that the Iranian foreign minister himself had stated that there is no room for diplomacy left after the airstrikes by United States took place on Friday?
Well, I think that we should listen carefully to the Iranian foreign minister. There is no room for diplomacy from the Iranians' point of view. You see how diplomatic the Iranian regime was this morning when President Trump called for an immediate ceasefire. And even after the ceasefire limit or the clock began to ring, the Iranian regime launched ballistic missiles at Israeli residential buildings, killing a number of children. So that's about as diplomatic as the Iranian regime is and has been since 1979. You're probably well aware that the Iranian regime has murdered over 1,000 Americans and after it kidnapped 52 Americans and held them for 444 days. So the notion that there is a diplomatic solution opposite a messianic death cult in Tehran is rather wishful thinking.
Dan, many are saying that Iran's own policy at the moment is trying to find a balance between deterrence and even strategic preemption as far as containing Iran's nuclear program is concerned. How do you decode Israel's own strategy right now? Israel has, of course, gone to announce that their Operation Rising Lion was a success and that it already demonstrated Israel's aerial superiority over Iran. But how much how much of a water does it hold at the moment as we decode Israel's strategy?
Thank you for the question. Israel's victory till this point has been a tactical victory, not a strategic victory. And in our assessment, President Trump's announcement of a ceasefire, his attempt to mediate a ceasefire, is premature. Because if the great people of India and other friends of the state of Israel and the United States want to have peace, security, and stability in the whole Asia Middle East region, there's going to have to be a strategic victory against this regime that has dedicated itself to the mass murder of and death to America. That is what President Trump has repeatedly said in quoting the Iranian regime. Death to America, death to Israel. They've been doing that for 46 years and they're committed to that. It's very interesting that you mentioned
the ceasefire, which is going to be my next question. How much does the ceasefire make sense? Does it even mean that it's going to hold, given that Prime Minister Netanyahu has already called himself as the liberator of Iran. Iran is still not liberated from the Iranian regime. The US president has talked about making Iran great again, and he does believe that the Iranian regime is not doing much good to the people of Iran. So does the ceasefire even make sense for Iran and the United States?
Well, it's actually the Iranian people, 90% of whom reject this regime that rapes and murders women and murders political opposition figures, hangs children from cranes as well as homosexuals from cranes. So the liberation that Israel began to employ to help the Iranian people, those declarations of liberation are coming from the Iranian people themselves. If you listen to their WhatsApps and to their videos and to Iran International, but there has to be a strategic victory. There is no ceasefire right now. What ceasefire are we talking about? The Iranian regime has already fired subsequent to the ceasefire. I will mention one important cognitive point, and that is that one of the difficulties with the president's well-intentioned ceasefire is that it said, "God bless Iran, God bless Israel, God bless the Middle East." By doing that, he's actually empowering the Iranian regime to stay in power at the expense of its own people. I'm sure it was unintended, but that's the way things work in Iran. The Iranian people want a different future for themselves. They see Israel as the first step in their liberation, and the only way that this is going to resolve itself is if the Iranian regime cracks, collapses, goes home, and a new positive future of freedom and potentially democracy that the great people of India know so well. Prime Minister Modi has been such a harbinger of democracy and freedom. That's what they need for the people of Iran.
Dan, the US Vice President, Mr. Vance, has already gone on record to say that their war is not against the people of Iran, but against Iran's nuclear enrichment program. Can a military conflict ensure that Iran ends their nuclear enrichment program? Should there not be scope for dialogue and diplomacy to bring Iran to the negotiating table? Many foreign policy analysts believe that it is incumbent upon the US to now bring Iran to the negotiating table, given that it was Donald Trump who exited the JCPOA.
First of all, Vice President Vance is absolutely correct. This is a war against the Iranian regime messianic death cult. And I use those words very carefully. This is a regime that has promised to bring back, out of occultation, the Mahdi, the 12th Shiite Imam, by causing Agog and Magog events across the world. The Iranian people need to be liberated. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has called the Iranian people great friends of the Jewish people, dating all the way back to Cyrus the Great. The problem with diplomacy, how did it work out in 2015 with the JCPOA? The International Atomic Energy Agency has just issued last week a report calling the Iranian regime in egregious violation of the non-proliferation requirements for the Iranian regime. They have cheated. They have cheated and violated from the first moment the JCPOA in 2015. That's why President Trump left the JCPOA, and in fact, the only way to end this nuclear threat to the free world is through military means. That includes destroying the Iranian nuclear program. That includes destroying the Iranian ballistic missile program, which, as we speak, could reach India and cause great damage to.
But Dan, the damage perhaps is already out in the open. The IAEA has still not come out with a damage assessment. There are fears of a potential radioactive leakage. How do you speak to those concerns of these fears of a radioactive leakage, Iran perhaps also taking their uranium stockpile out of the Fordo nuclear power plant? Nobody knows really where that entire uranium stockpile is. So how do you speak to those fears?
Well, I think you've named those fears very well, and you've actually answered the question that you asked. What do you think we should trust an Iranian regime that has lied in every sentence that they've said since 2015 and even before, since 2003, when they stopped their nuclear program just for a few minutes once Saddam Hussein was removed from power? Do you trust the Iranian regime to rid themselves of all of this enriched uranium?
Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but many are also talking about how Saddam Hussein's regime and the end to that entire regime is testimony in itself, what happened to Iraq and what happened to Middle East. And that's why they are warning against a similar parallel-like situation arising in Iraq. They're saying that be warned that you cannot have a similar situation in Iran, because we've seen what happened post-Saddam Hussein. You had an ISIS springing up.
That's true. You had an ISIS springing up. The difference, and there's always that risk. There's always that risk of rogue elements of the IRGC taking control. That's why you need to have total victory. What total victory means, it means the total destruction of the ballistic and nuclear programs and we will begin to see, and I've spoken to leaders of the Iranian opposition myself, when we begin to see that senior members of the IRGC are switching sides, are taking over the national television stations, are taking over some of the sensitive sites, and they are announcing that this regime is finished, that is the beginning. That is the beginning of what we thought we were going to get in Iraq, but we didn't get in Iraq. This regime is the leading danger to the free world, and it must be. The Iranian people must take their future in their own hands. The vast majority of the Iranian people are Democrats. They love the free world. They love the United States, and they love Israel. It is up to them to put together the coalition that the Iranian Transitional Council is already cobbling together in Europe and in the United States as we speak. So the situation between Iran and Iraq are totally different situations. You are absolutely correct that there is always a risk that rogue elements could take control of the government in the event of the death of Khamenei, or in the event that he runs away to whether it's to China, whether it's to another country. But that risk is worth taking as long as the United States and Israel and the Western Alliance impose a total victory over this very, very problematic terror regime in Iran.
All right.
In
Many
Tehran.
thanks to you, Dan, for sharing your precious perspective with us. Truly appreciate your time here.
Network 18 is now the clear leader in digital media, with 55% more users on native platforms and social media than Times Internet. Network 18, the undisputed leader of news networks, way ahead of the times.